Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. We want to welcome one of our newer strategic partner affiliate members, the Traverse City Golf and Country Club. So welcome to Scott Herbert and the rest of his team. And of course, we are welcoming our new member on behalf of our generous sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. We heard from them last week. They're really growing throughout Michigan. You can learn more at consumerscu.org. So Brian, we kind of teased our first story in our member newsletter today and on social media, and that UPS strike, or the potential for the UPS strike. So why don't you give us a little background about what's going on and then start with what's at stake here?
Yeah, the UPS strike, potential UPS strike is a very, very big deal. And what's at stake is you got kind of the direct impact. So, across the whole company, the unionized workforce is somewhere between 325 and 350,000 people. Like, it's a really, really big workforce. According to the company, about 6% of the US GDP is carried by UPS. US GDP is massive. Okay, so then also of the millions of parcels that are delivered each day, they have about a 25% market share. So this is a really big deal for them to go down for even a little while, given that it's such a big part of moving things across the landscape, across the economy. So it would definitely have a big ripple impact on the overall supply chain. A lot of people think of UPS as being an end consumer product, but it's also a business service as well. So this is the sort of thing that, just while it seems like the supply chains are pretty healed from where they were in 2020 and 2021, and just that recovery over the last year or so, this is the sort of thing that could set it back. I don't think it would be, if it happens, if a strike happens, I don't think it would be long term, but it would definitely be disruptive.
So what issues are remaining in this negotiation?
The main thing that is remaining now is wages for part-time workers. So there's a portion of the staff. I gather it's not an insignificant portion of the UPS staff, which is actually part-time. And that seemed, at least according to public reports, you never know on the inside if there's more to it than that. I suppose there probably is, but it seems to be the most public of the disagreements remaining is the pay for the part-time workforce.
And what's our deadline here? When do they have to decide by?
The contract expires at the end of the month, so August 1st would be the date when you'd see the first disruption from any potential strike. And the workers have already voted to authorize a strike if an agreement is not reached. So when the clock hits midnight, that's the agreement expires, and that's when they would be on strike. I wouldn't be surprised if they came to an agreement before the deadline. These things often go to the brink, especially when they're contentious, but and then they come up with an agreement. But lately it hasn't been too unusual for there to be at least short-term stoppages of work while an agreement is worked out. So for those who rely on parcel delivery for either things you're bringing in or things that you're sending out, you might want to think ahead, triaging what are the things that you absolutely can't do without, and do you have any type of contingency plans? Although I don't think there'll be any hiding from the logistical problems, because if a major carrier like UPS went offline for a few days or a week or something like that, then there would be a lot of additional activity that would go to the other carriers who probably don't have capacity in order to pick all that up. So no matter who you use, it would probably be impacted, at least in the short term. But something to really think ahead and be prepared for. Sometimes it's just a matter of warning your customers that this is something that's looming out there. It's out of your control and it might impact your ability to deliver on goods and services here during this time period.
All right. Well, thanks for the update on that. We'll certainly be following this closely and hopefully have some good news to share on the briefing next Monday. Let's talk about some positive signs. The unemployment here in Michigan is down and labor force participation is up. So tell us more about what this might indicate.
The July numbers looked real strong. So the unemployment rate is down to 3.6%, lowest it's been in 23 years. And that's a combination of different factors. Of course, a lot of demand for people and not very many people is a big part of it. But what I really liked about this report was not the rate, but the fact that there was an increase in labor force participation. So people re-entering the workforce that were out of the workforce. And that's how it's supposed to work. Unemployment gets low, wages have been rising for quite a while. But bringing more people into the workforce, which is desperately needed. So for context purposes, for Michigan, this is a 23-year low. Across the U.S., 25 states are currently at or within 1% of their lowest unemployment rate ever. Again, high demand for people with just the generational shifts. This is really putting a pinch on the labor force, and that rate is going low. There are some states that are at record lows right now: Arkansas, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Massachusetts, and Maryland. Very different states. All of them find themselves at record low unemployment rates right now.
Line 5 is back in the news. We recently talked about an Army Corps of Engineers decision, but what's happening now?
The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to review a lower federal court decision. So at the state level, it's Attorney General Dana Nessel who is challenging Line 5 in every which way that she can think of, presumably, because there's been a lot of different challenges. None of them have really been successful. But what she's wanting to do is to get the Line 5 decision out of federal court and into state court. It's an odd place for it to be because it's subject to federal treaties and national companies that own property here in Michigan. It would be state court would be a pretty strange place for this one to land. A lower federal court said, no, it belongs in federal court. It doesn't belong in state court. You got to kind of finish your way through that process. But the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals did agree to listen to arguments about why the case should be moved. A little bit of a surprise. I wouldn't read too much into it, but a little bit of a surprise that they agreed to even hear the reasons why that decision of the lower court to keep it in federal as opposed to move to state, why that decision should be reviewed. So they scheduled just arguments and briefs from the parties. So sit tight on that. Again, I don't really expect that will change the outcome, but a little bit of a surprise that they even agreed to hear the arguments.
All right, moving on to a report on community colleges that was released by business leaders. How are Michigan community colleges doing?
Yeah, business leaders for Michigan, they put out actually quite helpful reports. It's that the whole business community looks to and relies on in our own policy making and policy analysis. And they did a real deep dive into the performance of community colleges here in Michigan. We have 28 community colleges here. And they are and have proven to be a great tool for people to affordably move from no credential to a credential. You might recall a few years ago when SBAM and Business Leaders for Michigan and several other business groups banded together to support tuition-free community college for more people in Michigan for adults returning to community college. Our one caveat was that there had to be transparency and accountability support around students to make sure that they don't wash out of the system, and for good reason. We knew this anecdotally before, now we've got the data. So how are we doing? First, enrollment is down 56% over the last several years. So just a massive decline in enrollment. Now, community colleges are a big portion of their funding actually comes from property taxes. So just because they got less students, you haven't heard community colleges that have complained as much as other types of schools that get funded by student. Of course, they get tuition and so forth, but a big chunk of many community colleges are funded by is real estate property taxes, and therefore the enrollment hasn't really hit the enrollment decline proportionately hasn't hit their budget. In other words, budgets aren't down 56%. That is 48th in the nation, by the way. So it's declined faster than all but 2 other states. Now, what's more important than that even is the completion rate, and the only 27% of people who start community college complete and get this 6 years. So that's the students are tracked for 6 years. How many complete after a max of 6 years? And the answer is 27%. That is 49th in America. Not good. So this is the reason why our business coalition that would love to see more credentials. By the way, it's not just associate's degrees, but it includes that. It's not just half of a bachelor's, an affordable way to kind of pursue your bachelor's, and it is that too. But it's also post-high school credentials and certificates that are not degrees, skilled trades, in other words, that community colleges are involved in. We know we need more of those in Michigan, given just the population trends that we've been experiencing. But we definitely need a higher success rate out of our community colleges than what we're seeing today.
So within this report, did they offer any suggestions for improvements?
Yeah, I would. Within the report, they looked at the same sorts of things that we put in our conditions for supporting the Reconnect expansion in the first place, which is that there has to be accountability for students, but also an understanding on a student by student basis what is in the way of their successful completion and how can we help with the resiliency and the completion rate among them. So that means kind of a wraparound service type of an approach. And I know there's probably a few that are out there saying, well, back in my day, we never had to support students and they were able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And you know, it used to be more like that. It's not like that today. And we can't afford to have 73% of the students washed out of the system. We just cannot afford to have that be the case. And so when we have, when we can identify issues, it might be things like childcare, it might be transportation, it might be just other kind of expenses and just things in life that come up with adults that make it just difficult for them to continue dealing with those issues. Having a system that can recognize and come up with a plan with the students to deal with those issues and keep them in class is going to be necessary. So the other thing in terms of the enrollment decline, Reconnect will help that. It already is helping. So we see the enrollment starting to stabilize and increase in some of the schools with Reconnect. And in this last budget, there was an age cutoff of 25. Now it's 21. It will be 21 after this budget takes effect in October. So it is that part of it. I think the enrollment decline Reconnect is really going to help with. The supports that that the Reconnect and the accountability measure that the governor signed at the urging of the business community at the end of last year, I think also speaks to many of these issues.
All right, let's move on to a recent Gallup poll that was about the most trusted institutions, and small businesses topped the list again.
That's right. So there is a thing, there's just a trend happening across all institutions where there's low faith in the general public among institutions that used to be very highly trusted, and a declining trend over several years. And small businesses have always been up high. And in fact, the last few years we've been #1, the most trusted of any, and I know it's a weird term, institutions, but it's kind of like different groups of people or organizations And and they look at the presidency, they look at the Supreme Court and Congress, they look at public health organizations, they look at religions and religious leaders. There's all different types of, like quote unquote institutions. And there are actually only two that were trusted over 40%, small businesses being one, and coming in at 65%. So really, really strong performance. And it makes a lot of sense when you consider that small businesses are part of communities. People know those who own the small businesses. They're not some far off entity. But let me give you a few other examples here. Those that have higher trust levels, the other two over 40 being the military and the police at 69, the military, the police at 51. So two other higher, or I'm sorry, actually I was looking at this, I've got 21, 22, and 23. It's just small business in the military that are over that are 60 and 65%. The police coming in at 43, medical system, it's a pretty broad term, but 34% trusted, church or organized religion, 32%, US Supreme Court, 27, banks, 26, public schools, 26, the presidency, 26. So, having 3 out of 4 people not trust these institutions is really a major shift in the last generation. But at the top, small business owners, which it's, I think it's a really important place in terms of the economy and the community leadership role that small businesses play. Obviously, standing up well compared to virtually everybody else out there across the economy.
All right, Brian, let's talk about your recent appointment to a new council, the Growing Michigan Together Council. This is a gubernatorial appointment. So can you talk a little bit about what this council is and the work that you plan to do?
Yeah, there's a council kind of loosely called the Population Council, but it's the Growing Michigan Together Council. There's 2 co-chairs, a Republican and a Democrat, that the governor appointed in the spring. And then late spring, I think in the end of May, at the Mackinac Policy Conference. And then there are 14 other appointees that were named later. I happen to be one of those appointees. It is definitely the right focus. When you look at the biggest challenges that we have over the horizon, it's the fact that we have low labor force participation in our state. And the portion of those who would normally be in the workforce, is that mixture will change as baby boomers continue to exit the workforce, and the number of people entering the workforce is just smaller than the number of people leaving it. And we have outbound migration the last few years, and Michigan returned to the ranks of shrinking states in the last few years too. That's one of the reasons why the unemployment rate, while it's good, generally economically speaking, to say it's low, but still we are a shrinking state. It's one of the reasons why the unemployment rate is so low. And that is it's something that really it's not sustainable over time, at least not with the way that we're used to the economy working. And so the charge of the council is to evaluate, establish goals, and recommend policies that could change the population trends. And I would warn though, that this is generational long work to change population trends. Not like you change a few things and it just turns around. It's a bunch of things done well over a long period of time. To go from a shrinking state to a stable state to a slightly growing state, like that's 5 to 10 years worth of work just there before you kind of hit that momentum where there's real serious growth. And our demographics are working against us. So this is going to be a real challenge. It is a bipartisan council, so there's people from both sides of the aisle and independents that are involved in it. And then there's also 4 work groups, and the 4 main work group areas are infrastructure, K-12 education, higher education, and talent in the economy. So, so we'll be looking at business issues and business climate, people issues, and workforce and training, and making sure that we've got a center of activity with our people, but also the infrastructure that's required, the education systems. A great higher ed system that attracts people from all over the world, but not so good at keeping people after they graduate here. So lots of opportunities, but again, just a caution that this type of work is a grind, and I don't think anybody should expect that there are quick fixes. It took literally several generations to get to where we're at today, and I think that a sustained, effective effort will take many years to make a substantial impact in the type of direction our population has been going.
Well, we look forward to getting updates from you as the work progresses. So there was something kind of notably missing as negotiations began between the UAW and automotive CEOs. What was that?
I had alluded before that when Shawn Fain was elected as the new leader of the UAW, taking out the previous leader in the UAW elections last spring, that it was done with a whole different posture, like a very kind of rough and tumble type posture. There is a ceremony that happens at the beginning of the automaker union negotiations, and that is a symbolic handshake between the president of the UAW and the president of the automakers, or the CEO of the automakers. And Fain, the leader of the UAW, decided that he was not willing to shake hands with management of the auto companies, and saying, "I'll shake hands after we have an agreement, not before." So that would kind of send a message, right, that they do not intend to be cordial or friendly in the process. It's all business, and we're not friends. And it's a very different posture that even in the roughest of negotiations in the past, they could still muster the stomach for a handshake, and apparently that is just offering too much or asking too much at this stage in the game. So I think we're probably in for a doozy, and of course here in Michigan, the prospects of work stoppages at automotive companies can be more quickly and more intensely felt here.
Now, normally the UAW and the president would be strong allies, but there's been some friction there too. President Biden and Shawn Fain did recently meet. How did that go?
Yeah, so the tough words from Mr. Fain are not just reserved for management, but also for the president. So saying the UAW would not endorse the president until the president and the federal government's subsidies to the automakers came with strings attached. And what they're most concerned about, what the UAW is most concerned about, is that as this move to electrification, there will be massive disruption in the automotive industry. The number of components that are needed for electric vehicles is far fewer. So just a lot of people will be without jobs, and a lot of the things that you source come from other countries. To make batteries, the most expensive components of the automobile. So the real question I think the UAW has for the president is, as you're handing out all of these subsidies, and I would add that there's probably a question for many states like Michigan as well, that sooner or later this will come up. As you're handing out these subsidies, what guarantees are you making to those who work in the supply chain of the unionized workers that UAW would represent? What guarantees do you make for those workers who are now on combustible engine vehicles? You can't just say we're going to move them over to electric vehicles, different skill set, and you need far fewer people. So it really is something, just the cool nature of that relationship, where it would normally be a very warm relationship. They did meet though. Fain just visited the president at the White House, so I haven't read any kind of detailed reports about what came of that, if it went well or didn't go well. But maybe unlike the automotive management, at least presumably there was a handshake in the Oval Office.
All right, let's talk about an issue here in Michigan. The state of Michigan, as an employer, has dropped marijuana testing for its employment screening. Is this across the board?
Well, it's for most hires. So if you go to work for the state of Michigan, in the past, if you've ever gone to work for the state of Michigan, one of the things that you're required to do is take a drug test, and you have to pass that drug test. One of the things they test for or screen for is marijuana use. Now, marijuana is now legal in Michigan. And so the state has decided to not test for marijuana. You still can't go to work high. So I think that's an important distinction. You can lose your job for going to work high, but unlike alcohol, marijuana stays in your system for a longer period of time. So like the idea is whatever you want to do in your free time that's legal, you can do. There are some exceptions, though. It does not apply to corrections officers, does not apply to state troopers, drivers, or healthcare workers. So those four, it doesn't apply to. Some pretty obvious reasons, I think, in those four categories. The new rule does also do away with the 3-year ban from state jobs for people who tested positive for marijuana in the past. So before, if you tested positive, you couldn't apply for a job at the state for another 3 years. It does away with that ban. So anybody who's applied for a job in the past and figured you had to wait 3 years, that rule is no more. But again, not for state troopers, corrections officers, healthcare workers, or drivers.
All right, Brian, in the beginning of the year, we talked a lot about, what was happening in the banking industry, the financial sector. Things have seemed relatively quiet lately. Are there any updates or things that we need to know now or be concerned about?
Yeah, I would say generally that that things are looking good in that industry. So there were some bank failures, some pretty good sized bank failures, but I would say mid-level in the grand scheme of things in banking. And with Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank, and then eventually First Republic Bank, all three failing. And so there was a concern about this ripple effect. The Federal Reserve did allow banks to borrow against the face value of their bonds, as long as those were treasury bonds. And so in other words, they would never have to cash them out at a loss. They could hold them to maturity. And if you look at the way that banks have utilized that program, of course, the amount of borrowing that banks did against those types of assets, when it was no longer limited to the net present value, but the face value, that went way up. The use of that tool went way up, and then it kind of stabilized. Now, bank stocks have generally they've been down, and they haven't really recovered from where they were before. But if you look at bank earnings, they look strong. Asset quality among banks looks strong. They're definitely pulling back on activities, but it's not just because they're not finding good deals out there. It's mainly because they want to maintain strong liquidity. So I would say that the banking industry does not look like it's in crisis. Actually, it never looked like a real crisis to me. What I thought before there was a crisis of confidence, and that turned into real problems for real banks and investors in those banks. But in terms of the underlying strength of banks and their balance sheets, short of a run on a bank, they looked good to me before. They still look good today, and I think generally confidence has returned to the sector. Very rarely do you hear or see skittish behavior in the financial sectors these days, certainly as compared to the beginning of the year.
Excellent news. All right, that's pretty much everything we have for you today. We will be back here next Monday If you're in the Lansing area, we are hosting an owner-to-owner event this Thursday at the Lansing Shuffle. You can learn more at sbam.org/events. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.